Up until this point, your choices for electric estate cars have been reasonably limited. There is the MG5 and then perhaps the Porsche Taycan, though that is considerably more expensive. But this year is the arrival of the heavyweight new electric estate car, and it's the new BMW i5 Touring. Now, of course, we've had an experience of the regular i5, but if you're after a more practical option, then the Touring has always been the go-to, regardless of which generation of 5 Series you're looking at. So is this the ideal future family EV? Well, we've come to Germany to find out.
The i5 Touring understandably looks quite similar to the regular saloon i5. However, it's got some crucial changes, mainly in its switch to becoming an estate car. It's got the same smoothed out front end, but it all tapers into that more upright rear. And I think personally that this Touring looks far better at the back of the car than the saloon version, which does look a little bit dumpy and awkward. However, there are some neat touches like the front grille, which is big and bold, and the slim headlights, which fold neatly into the arches at the side.
Naturally, there are a lot of similarities between the interior of the regular i5 Saloon and this Touring version, but that's not a problem. It's a really nice place to be. Everything has a nice solid feel to it. And though I would like some warmer materials perhaps, so maybe replace this with some wood and replace this with a more brushed feeling, it's overall a really pleasant place to be. The steering wheel continues to be quite chunky, and that's a real personal aspect. I'm not a huge fan of the overly chunky wheel, but you might be. And then we've got this huge wraparound screen setup, which has become synonymous with the latest BMWs, and it's got pretty much everything you can need. They've made some shortcut buttons down the bottom, but it's still very packed with features. And though you can get some of these settings quite easily when you are on the move, I would like a couple more quick shortcut buttons just to make things a little bit easier. Though you do get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which both work really nicely and take up the full area of the screen, which doesn't always happen. The 5 Series Touring has always been able to deliver plenty of space in the rear, and as you can see, it's the same case in this new i5 Touring. There's loads of space for my knees and for my feet. Actually, it's the feet room that really plays out here because you can really stretch out. It just makes it all a little more comfortable. These seats themselves are really nicely padded and wide too, though the downside of this platform is that because the 5 Series Touring of this generation is offered with a plug-in hybrid and in certain markets a diesel and a petrol, you still get the transmission hump in the middle, which means that that person sitting in the centre of the car is going to feel quite squashed. So that is a bit of a downside against a platform which is designed primarily for electric vehicles. However, we do have loads of usable functions, independent controls for the seat heating and for the ventilation, and we've actually got 4 USB-C sockets, which is fantastic. So no one's going to be arguing about their devices and who gets to top them up, because you've got 2 here and 1 in the seat back as well. The only thing is there's no string back here, there's no storage at all, and there's only a little pocket at the side, so I would like some more storage at the front, but overall very comfortable and most importantly very spacious. Something that I've got to point out about the new i5 Touring and the 5 Series Touring in general is that it doesn't have the glass hatch anymore. Where's that gone? That used to be the best feature. You used to be able to pop that and the glass section used to come up independently, and that's gone now. But glass hatches aside, boot space. We've got 570 litres as standard, and it's a really usable area as it has been in previous generations of 5 Series Touring. Nice and flat, low, so putting those heavier items or getting the dogs in and out is going to be really simple. Underneath, we've got some extra storage for the cables and for all your charging paraphernalia, and there's some extra netting in there too. Of course, as with any Touring, you can expand the boot space by lowering down the rear seats, but even as standard, I think it's a really usable area and very practical, which is just what you want from a large estate car. But I just wish the glass hatch was back. So driving the new i5 Touring, what is it like? Well, I've got a really pleasant seating position actually, with lots of adjustability depending on where I want to go, and the steering wheel is nice and adjustable too, so everything kicks off nice. It's all very user friendly and it feels familiar because it's very BMW. That's the only way I can describe it. This is a car that feels like it's been designed first and foremost as an estate car and then adapted to be an electric vehicle, but the powertrain underneath it is still really cohesive and well put together. BMW claims that in the most efficient and in fact the lowest spec i5 Touring that you can get, the eDrive 40, you should get up to 343 miles of range from a single charge, which is remarkably decent. I've spent plenty of time with the i5 Saloon and it's got loads of range, and actually it does really well at a cruise, which is where a lot of EVs tend to falter, because operating at higher speeds they just don't really like it, and that's a failing of the powertrain in general. This standard version brings 0 to 60 miles an hour in just under 6 seconds as well, so there's no downside in terms of performance, from what I think anyway, against the full dual motor, all singing, all dancing M version. That brings the lowest range, and actually it knocks about 30 miles of range off the overall total. And as with most EVs, I just find that the i5 Touring is most pleasant in its standard setup, in its single motor setup. It's lighter, it's more efficient, it's got more range, and that speaks volumes ahead of performance when you're looking at heavy EVs. I'd always rather a little extra range instead of, well, something that can do 0 to 60 in around about 4 seconds, 3 seconds. It's just much nicer. The ride quality, we're on adaptive dampers on this car, and that is an option on some vehicles. The ride is excellent. We are driving on some pretty smooth roads through Bavaria, but I have aimed to go for some rough areas around town, and the i5 Touring does remarkably well to shake off the lumps and bumps. So it feels just as refined and just as comfortable as its predecessor, which did remarkably well in those areas. Visibility is good, of course, being a Touring. The rear hatch is slightly small and it is impeded slightly by the rear headrest. And in fact, if you've got passengers back there, then your rearward visibility isn't going to be the best. Over the shoulder, there's lots of glass, so that really helps with that over the shoulder visibility and ensures there's not too much of a blind spot when you're looking out there, such as when you're merging onto a road or you're coming out of a parking space. What I really like about this car is it just feels so polished. The braking, the performance, the responsiveness from the throttle, it's all exactly as you'd want it. It feels like a package which has been put together and polished over and over again until it was absolutely perfect to go out on the road. There is, of course, some cost that comes with all this polish, and the i5 Touring starts from just over £69,000, which is quite a wedge of cash for a 5 Series Touring. In fact, if you went up to the full fat M Sport version, you'd be looking around £100,000. £100,000 electric i5 Touring, regardless of the specification or speed, is a lot of money. Now, of course, I know that a lot of people are buying them on finance and not looking at them as a big chunk rather than instead monthly payments, but I still find an i5 Touring that costs this much from out of the box to be, well, it's quite a lot, isn't it, really? There are, of course, lots of driving modes that you can cycle through, and you still get a slightly futuristic engine noise to accompany your acceleration. I don't find it too intrusive on this car, and it adds a little bit of excitement. You can switch it off if you like to, so gun the throttle and you get a lot of this Hans Zimmer produced music, which again adds a bit of interest to this vehicle. But what I think the best takeaway from the i5 Touring is that it just feels so normal. That's the nicest part of it. I absolutely love a 520D or a 530D as a big diesel that can do big mileage, but these manufacturers do have to adapt to the times, and producing electric vehicles is becoming more difficult in order to channel what makes your company so well known in the first place into a battery powered vehicle. And I think that the i5 Touring still feels like a BMW, and that's the most important thing. It's an estate car that happens to be an EV rather than the other way around. Practical and smooth, I think this is a really good family car overall. I just wish the price was just a little bit lower because it's quite punchy. The standard i5 was already a very impressive thing, composed and refined and basically delivering everything you expect from a BMW, but with an electric powertrain underneath. And the Touring version extends that. It's got the practicality you want from a large family estate car, but I think the decent level of range and the fast charging performance means this really is a great car that could slot into day-to-day duties without too much fuss. I also think it looks kind of cool, both from the front and from the rear, but the rear glass hatch does need to be back in, and I do wish that BMW put that back into the i5 Touring for the next generation. However, as a true all-round estate car, I think the i5 Touring is actually quite hard to beat. Thank you for watching this Motors new car review of the BMW i5 Touring. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please leave us a like below and let us know in the comment section if you would choose this over a standard estate car or over something like a Porsche Taycan, perhaps a used example. And if you have enjoyed this video and want to see more of them, then you can subscribe to the Motors YouTube channel and just hit that bell icon so you get notified each time we upload a new video.